Who do y'all think are more attractive, liberals or conservatives?
Conservatives. Conservatives.
Conservatives.
Conservatives.
Conservative man, 100%, yeah.
Conservatives do tend to care more about what they look like.
Conservative people in general are just more good looking, just more fit.
I've not really seen an unattractive conservative man, so dump your liberal boyfriend.
All that junk inside your trunk.
I'ma get you drunk, get you love drunk off my hump. My hump, my hump, my hump, my hump, my hump. My hump, my hump, my hump, my lovely little lumps. Check it out. I drive these brothers crazy. I do it on the daily. They treat me really nicely. They buy me all these ices.
Liberty is rising. You understand how good it feels out here right now? You understand how high I am off being out here? This feels awesome. This feels fantastic.
But in my opinion, when you look at Kristen Stewart now, it's like she's let herself go. That's totally fine.
Who do you think of when you think about the hottest figures in modern politics? Ollie London? Ian Miles Chong? Elon Musk? Scientifically, if you said no to any of these, I know you're lying.
You guys don't think like an Oatly drinking soy boy can protect you, no?
Disgusting. No, they have no muscles. They don't go to the gym. They don't value masculinity. They're feminine. They drink too much tap water, and their bodies have been poisoned by estrogen.
I am not evil, I just misunderstood.
See, it's right here. The science is in. Conservatives are just more attractive. It's science. Forget Hassan, forget the Navarra gang and Owen Jones, forget everything you've heard. You don't think, and I know this for a fact, that really, deep down, that any of those commies you follow on OnlyFans or YouTube or anywhere else are sexy. No, the science tells me, Bridget Empire, in my capacity as science and culture correspondent for a 100% totally real peer-reviewed journal, The Daily Telegraph, that who you want to see stripping down for you, who you really picture when the lights go off, is Boris Johnson, Donald Trump, Rupert Murdoch. All the most gorgeous examples of man-meat ever to set foot upon this humble earth.
I mean, here's an article from 2 years ago, Why Progressive Women Want to Date Men Who Act Like Conservatives, and they wrote, the female desire to feel protected and looked after is built into our DNA.
What do you mean by that?
Except, well, that's not exactly what the science says. And even when scientific studies say that conservatives tend to be hotter than liberals, that doesn't mean that Kristen Stewart isn't making the entire sapphic world drool. Or that Tim Pool is suddenly considered one with the gods themselves.
But I'll tell you something you're not going to want to hear, and I admit it's I'll call it dickish. Utilitarianism is typically the villain in most movies.
I don't care.
Even here at the Daily Telegraph, we don't have a marble statue of a 5 out of 10 looking fascist with a beanie. I mean, we don't have busts of anyone else either, but that's only because Dan is scared that if he stares at one for long enough, it'll steal his soul. And then he'll be left to be the token sexy conservative in the office. Graham Linehan? Really? Christ. Anyway, before I go into the science of attractiveness, and all of the nuance that comes along with it, let's just upfront give you a headline for once in our lives. Are conservatives just hotter scientifically? We're going to find out today. The answer may surprise you. But it will probably, especially surprise, Mr. Timothy Poole, who tried to use the correlation between politically conservative beliefs and attractiveness to make a very strange argument a couple of months ago. Let me explain. From the beginning. And then, this channel will be getting a whole lot sexier.
So Rolling Stone did a cover with Kristen Stewart. Of course, everybody knows Kristen Stewart from Twilight. So following this, there was widespread criticism of the photo shoot because Kristen Stewart used what they describe as masculine-coded props, like a jock strap and a leather vest or whatever. Following the criticism, Rolling Stone published this. Right-wingers are terrified of our gay Kristen Stewart cover. She's wearing what looks like a pleather vest, not leather, it looks fake, with weights behind her, and she's sticking her hand in a jock strap. It looks... She looks like a drug addict. I mean that not to be mean. I don't know how else to describe what I see when I see this. Greasy hair, ill-kempt, strange haircut style. Look, the people that I knew that started doing drugs didn't go and buy haircuts anymore. He argued that queerness is an ideology, and appears to make people miserable. In the same post, he purposefully dead-named actor Elliot Page, a trans man, claiming media depictions of him and Stewart are intended to demoralize. I don't know about that. What I've heard is that the general idea with Kristen Stewart looking disheveled and greasy is a rejection of beauty norms. Yeah, okay. Right. Now, in my view, it sounds like you don't care anymore. Do you agree? If you do, then we have no argument. I don't think Kristen Stewart cares anymore. She looks greasy, and her hair looks like she doesn't take care of it at all. Kaya Rychik, who, lives of TikTok, wrote disgusting in response to Ali London. And, look, I mean, her hair is greasy, and it's cut strangely, and I gotta be honest, it looks like her haircut was just cut by a friend, and not trying to style it in any way. Not trying to look good. Ian Miles Chong said, "What did Hollywood do to Kristen Stewart? There are some humans that barf when they see things that are gross and some that don't. The ones that do are more likely not to be ingesting things that are toxic, poisonous, or whatever, and they're less likely to die of disease or like sepsis or something. And those who didn't care about it were probably less likely to succeed." This means that right now, we know this. Let me see. We'll jump to that one in a second. Here we go. Swan dating. Are right-wing people more attractive? A recent Danish study used machine learning to predict the political bias of 3,323 people. Based only on an analysis of their faces. Its accuracy was 61%. A good amount better than chance. What's more, it found that good-looking faces were more likely to belong to right-wing candidates, adding to an increasingly substantial literature that finds conservative people more attractive. They go on to mention several more studies that find this. Now, there's a lot to break down here, but I think it really comes down to, if you're an attractive person, life's probably easier for you. Thus, you'll think to yourself, if I could do it, why don't you? If you're ugly, you're probably going to be a collectivist because people are not as nice to you. You might be a bit more bitter of a person. The trope is that you go to the RNC and you see a lot of tall men and a lot of busty women. And you go to the DNC, you see a lot of short men and fat women. And I'm not trying to be a dick. It's true.
I'm gonna come.
On January 31st, 2018, The Guardian published the article, Hunky Tory. Excuse me, I just had to throw up in my mouth. Hunky Tory. Attractive people more likely to be right-wing, study finds. The headline is followed up by this incredible picture of 10 out of 10 smoke show baddie Boris the Big Dog Johnson, looking here like a bin bag full of asbestos. Every woman's fantasy. The writer of the article, Hannah Summers, states, with apologies, "It's a finding unlikely to prove popular with Guardian readers, but a study has concluded that attractive people are more likely to be right-wing. Previous research has found that those who are good-looking are generally treated better, achieve higher social status, and earn more money, leading them to see the world as a just and fair place." My confidence in Hannah's conclusions might have been shaken by, I must again stress, this image of Boris Johnson staring at me while I was reading it. While I have no doubt there is good science to back this up, and I'll get to that later, this affront to my eyes made it hard to take in the message. And that shouldn't be the case, right? I'm a scientist. I know that these trivial things shouldn't sow doubt in my mind. And yet, while I'm processing this information, this pudding goblin is staring at me, insisting he's what people actually find attractive. But then, what is it about him, or people like him, that people find attractive? What do people find attractive in general? What biases are at play? And does it even matter? If a giant turd stood up on a podium and promised fully automated luxury gay space communism, I would vote for it. But even that turd would have been easier on the eye than this image of the man who killed hope for my entire generation. And given the white supremacist society we're living in, can we really separate the weight of oppression and hegemony from our perceptions of attractiveness and come up with something truly objective? The answer to that question, to cut a long story short, is no. Nevertheless, the headline, Hunky Tory, sat waiting in the back of my brain since the day I read it, occasionally surfacing when I tried to sleep, causing me to cringe myself awake. But even those disturbances eventually passed. 6 years later, however, this story would haunt me again, because this happened. In February 2024, Kristen Stewart, queer icon and star of Twilight, that movie where she played Diana, and most importantly, that Totino sketch on SNL, posed for a photo shoot with Rolling Stone, and gave an interview in which she was just like me, for real, saying, "I want to do the gayest thing you've ever seen in your life." And, proving once and for all that sapphics are braver than the troops, she absolutely did. Every woman who likes women was fawning over these pictures. The hair, the jockstrap, the poses, everything, just chef's kiss. This is lesbian culture. Unfortunately, straight men saw it, and as you might imagine, they came to the internet full of deep insight and extremely normal and totally not unhinged responses. Like these. Wokeness destroys the mind, body, and soul. Masculinize the feminine, feminize the masculine. Nasty you, garbage rag. Who is this young man? Why is his name Kristen? The gayest thing? That's offensive. This is a joke of an interviewer, biased to the extreme. Somewhere in the deep south, there's a dude cooking meth in a trailer with a Confederate flag hanging as a curtain. That looks just like this lady. She nailed that look. To be honest, it's not sexy, it's boring. This isn't Andro, all hypersexualized. It's trying too hard. Broken heart emoji. Sad face with a big sweat drop emoji. Lucky me, I'm a real woman and not a cis anything. This isn't edgy. She looks slimy. A girl with her hands down her pants for the public to see is nothing new. Congratulations to Rolling Stone for finding a way to make a half-naked woman look boring and try hard. That's a high degree of difficulty there. Black flag. Modern progressivism destroys everything that's beautiful. What a shame. This is what happens to the left. She looks like she smells bad. What's happened to her? What does Hollywood do to young beautiful women these days? Why is the greasy woman wearing a jock and a leather jacket? Posing as a homeless crack addict as a desperate plea for attention is indeed pretty gay. I'm sorry, this guy's name is Brad Nightman? She looks like a boy now. She's probably swinging a heartache down there, lol. Kapah! Now, you might be asking, what possibly could have provoked this reaction? Is it really just a response to a few sexy pictures of Kristen Stewart where she looks queer? Well, yes. But I think it goes further than that. These online meltdowns we're seeing over this are cope of the most extreme kind. For once, people are being catered to that aren't them. Just like the horror white conservatives experience at black people or women being in video games or big budget movies. The idea that a sexy magazine cover might be targeted at someone who's not them fills them with impotent rage. But because this is such an inexplicable feeling, they can't understand why they're mad. To understand it, they need to accept that they're coming at this viewpoint from a position of privilege. That it scares them when something is not targeted towards them, because for most of their life, that's been the norm. And that change threatens their worldview. But for themselves, they have to justify this disgust reaction, this fear reaction in their heads. And they do this by lying to themselves. Rolling Stone knows this is ugly. If I don't get to at least half chub at a picture of a woman, it means no one does. To them, that makes more sense than any world where something isn't made explicitly for them. But the ones that coped hardest in reaction to this photo shoot were not content with just making up some conspiracy about how the world is trying to gaslight them into thinking a lesbian might find a queer woman dressed like a queer woman attractive. No, they had to come out swinging. It's not just that society is being brainwashed. It's that their worldview, and their version of what attractive, is not subjective at all. It's science. Enter, unfortunately for us all, Pin Tool.
On average, conservatives tend to be more attractive. I mean, case in point, conservatives tend to be about getting in shape and eating healthy relative to Democrats who are about being fat and being happy about it. It's just plainly obvious. And there's reasons why not everybody, the majority of people, do not find obesity attractive. I don't care that Kristen Stewart wants to look the way she wants to look. I don't care that Rolling Stone does it, and I don't fear it in any way.
Tim Pool is a far-right commentator who likes to pretend he's a centrist, as they all do to various extents. He's become famous-ish in political circles for being a very strange man who never takes off his beanie hat, lest we realise he's bald, for promoting stochastic terrorism, and for having members of his own family make public statements denouncing him. Now, while there are worse fascist weirdos than this Lost Prophets tribute act, there are few people who have the reach that he does, and his denial of his true political colours allows him to whisper in the ears of more people than those who agree with him but are more upfront about their commitment to fascism. Now, Pin Tool often has some of the dumbest takes on the internet. He often uses Marvel movies and analogies in serious political discussion. He seems to have gone through his entire life not realising every genre of music and art he loves is explicitly left-wing, and trying to process that, well, it just didn't happen. So, having seen some of the responses to Kristen Stewart from your average Twitter blue check, you can probably imagine the reaction he had to this photo shoot. Kristen Stewart wanted to feed the lesbians. Tim Pool, as is the norm for him, was horrified that her pictures didn't make his pee-pee hard, and then he felt like he had to justify that with a complete non-sequitur that, frankly, threw me for a loop.
If swan.date, which I actually don't know what it is, it's like a dating website. If they're highlighting this Danish study, I was reminded of The Science of Sex, which is this documentary I saw, it's really old, like 20 years old probably. You can take a picture of a human being and show it to another human being anywhere in the world, and they will tell you whether or not they think the person is beautiful. And there is an average standard based upon human perception as to what is attractive and what is not.
In Pin Tool's very cool and very normal video, Kristen Stewart cover proves going woke makes people ugly. Studies prove the right is better looking. Jesus Christ, Tim, you've really got to work on your titles. I thought I was bad, but your video titles genuinely don't even fit in the preview. Honestly, if this guy wasn't up to his neck in billionaire money, no one would even watch this shit. Anyway, in what I suppose I'll call KSPGWMPUSPTRIBL for short, Tim, who definitely isn't mad, says,
if a guy likes, if dudes are into fat chicks, it's like, yeah, do your thing, man, everybody deserves love, I guess. But on average, there is an attractive face and unattractive faces. This means that for someone like Dylan Mulvaney, wondering why they're not having a date, it's because the overwhelming majority of people will look at you and say, you are gross.
Now, I can't let this clip slide without pointing out that, in this commentary, Tim brings up the fact that two of the main people criticising Kristen Stewart's appearance in this photo shoot were, 1, Ian Miles Chong, a man who looks like a prolapse having an allergic reaction, and Ollie London, the guy who got a bunch of surgeries to look Korean and ended up looking like this. These are the people calling Kristen Stewart ugly. Anyway, Adonis among men, Tim Pool, tries to justify this honestly impotent rage against a woman looking hot in a magazine by bringing up the scientific fact, as he would call it, that conservatives are just, statistically, more attractive. So why is it so important to Tim Pool that his lack of chub when faced with what is essentially crack for lesbians is objectively correct, scientific, and rooted in reality? Surely, as most of us can agree, attractiveness is subjective. It's perfectly fine to not find someone attractive that everyone else thinks is hot. So why do you have to try to find some evidence that they're definitely not hot? That it's not just you, that you can't possibly not understand? Why are you so pressed about trying to prove that the way you see the world is some sort of objective reality? I thought facts weren't supposed to care about your feelings. So why is it so infuriating to you that other people have the hots for someone that you personally find unattractive? I personally find Channing Tatum unattractive. I don't like big muscles on men, or men without beards really, or men in general. But I'm not out here making videos trying to prove that scientifically everyone secretly just wants to be railed by Shane from the L Word wearing a strap. Even if I secretly think that you, Tim, personally do. And though Tim Pool does concede in this video that he's not a paragon of masculinity, or in his own words, I'm not He-Man. Sorry, He-Man is the guy. It's the guy with the carrot haircut and the pink shirt. Anyway, he acknowledges that not everyone's going to have the same opinion on attractiveness, and yet he feels the need to try and make his opinion on Kristen Stewart objective. Apparently, the world has stripped Kristen Stewart of her general human appeal, based on some idea that there is an objectivity to attractiveness, despite just conceding a second before that there isn't one. Now Tim, unfortunately for you, as well as being a tranny, a commie, and a Brit for my sins, I also happen to have a PhD in biology, so just for you, I'm going to go through the literature on your claims and show everyone just how right you are about this, if you are, and why it obviously definitely matters, and that your frantic searching of Google Scholar for hot conservative isn't just copium for failing to get an erection from a magazine cover. So, Tim points to this website for justification for this claim, and as you can see, rather than citing a study or an article about a study, he cites this dating website citing a study. I mean, it does link to the study it's referencing, but it's just a weird choice. And to go with this reference, Tim speculates that right-wingers just care more about their appearance, and just are more attractive because they try to be, missing the more obvious link between wealth and conservatism. People who are wealthy are more likely to be conservative. And a lot of the signifiers we associate with attractiveness, from straight teeth to well-fitted clothes to perfect haircuts, are things that cost money. Sometimes a lot of money. And if we're considering the fact too that wealthy people sometimes splash out on Botox, facelifts and the like, it hopefully becomes clear that some of the most obvious signifiers of attractiveness, at least the ideal of attractiveness society teaches us the most desirable, is restricted to the wealthy. And this doesn't mean that all conservatives are just objectively hotter, but that there are certain signifiers of attractiveness, as it has been taught to us, that are more easily attainable to conservatives. Obviously to me, if not to Tim Pool, this doesn't mean that the people leaving these comments are going to be gigachads and megastasis.
Just another filthy, irrelevant celebrity trying to get attention.
Normalising this kind of narcissism is not a good look, Rolling Stone. What happened to you?
This isn't gay. It's cultural appropriation of fringe porn culture. Porn does not mean gay.
This does not look like lesbian. This looks more like gay men in a leather bar, hopped up on poppers on a self-destructive binge of hedonism. This is not something anyone should applaud. Ah, she used to be so pretty. Now she looks like a brunette Joe Dirt. Sad face. I've already seen her diddle her skittle. Kristen Stewart has become truly disgusting.
Why she listens to agenda? I'd be fine with her doing the last thing I ever see her do in my life.
What does that mean? White trash child molester vibes. Smell her own musky depths.
A half-naked woman on the cover of a magazine. Groundbreaking.
Correction! She has no idea who she is and is lost! She's broken! Sad face.
I don't care who you are. This cover is so gross. Sick face.
Not quite getting the same publicity since doing Twilight a decade ago, huh, Kristen? I wonder what changed. Oh, it's gotta be the homophobia, right? Couldn't possibly be that no one found you attractive or interesting since you changed into this hideous mess.
Oh fuck it, I'm not even gonna read this one out. We need to go back! Mistakes were made! Even lesbians are like, nah man, Joe Dirt is out of tone on. Throwing up emoji. Who the fuck is Joe Dirt? Meanwhile, on a lesbian Twitter, I need this magazine physical. God, she's gorgeous. Hard eyes emoji. This picture just moved my Kinsey rating. Hot! Awooga! Holy fuck, like, oh my god, like, wow. I'm gay! I think I have COVID. She's become so powerful, I'm gnawing at the bars of my enclosure. Kristen could punch me in the face and I'd say, thank you, queen. I barked on my hands and knees. Knock knock, who's there? My boner! So, back to the matter at hand. The dating site Tim Pool uses as a reference for this claim summarises a single study with this snippet.
A recent Danish study used machine learning to predict the political bias of 3,323 people, based only on an analysis of their faces. Its accuracy was 61%, a good amount better than chance. What's more, it found that good-looking faces were more likely to belong to right-wing candidates, adding to an increasingly substantial literature that finds conservative people more attractive. So, to clarify for you all, this is a dating website making reference to a study on machine learning practices, in which it found that what we are increasingly calling AI, despite it not really being AI, considers good-looking faces more likely to be right-wing. Now, this says a fair bit more about how machine learning repeats the biases of the people making it
than it does about whether conservatives are actually more attractive objectively. A magical computer can't determine what's attractive and what's not. It's learning based on what humans think, the data it's being fed. It's being fed this information, and then it's spitting back that information in different forms. All this means is that the information it's being trained on implies people find conservatives more attractive. So this isn't some sort of objective measurement of attractiveness because it comes with a computer. It comes with all the biases and all the subjectivity that human judgment does. As an example of that bias, one of the bullet points in the summary of this article is, in the US, elected female Republicans have more feminine faces than elected female Democrats. Now, you might notice that there are a lot more Democrats that are not white than there are Republicans, for obvious reasons. And so you have to ask, as all good scientists do, the obvious questions here in response. Does this machine learning algorithm have a racial bias? Like many before it have? And the follow-up question to that question, what was this algorithm trained on, and were they likely to have biases that would lead to this result? There's nothing more feminine about a white woman's face, but since we live in a white supremacist society, where white womanhood is held up as the default and the ideal, this is the kind of strange and frankly racist outcome you get when you read the results of these studies at face value, instead of doing what its intended audience would do, an audience of scientists that is, and think critically about the results and how they came to these results. Try to tear them to shreds, find any hole you can, make sure it stands up to scrutiny. This is how science works. It's survival of the fittest. Your study is in the Thunderdome now. Even if you beat the devastating power of Reviewer 1 and Reviewer 2, God fucking forbid, and you end up with your study published, you still have the entire scientific community looking at your shit, ready to fight your ideas for years and years until enough follow-up studies back you up to stop them being relentlessly up your grill. That aside, it's a shame Tim picked this as his example, because there are a bunch of studies that point out a correlation between perceived attractiveness and conservative beliefs that have nothing to do with machine learning. For example, that article that I mentioned at the beginning of this video, hunky-tory, well, that cites a study that combines a bunch of surveys of actual people. So once we're done with this bizarre AI hot or not study, we'll get back to the hunky-tory in the room. Oof, it's getting hot in here. Anyway, unlike Tim, I actually read the study beyond the summary on this dating site, and under the methods section, there is a subsection titled Attractiveness, which tells us that they used a publicly available dataset of 5,500 faces rated by 60 raters. So even with everything I've already said, this is based on the opinions of 60 people. Now, they rated a lot of faces, so their tastes are extensively documented, but it's still 60 people. And if you look into the README of this dataset, you'll see that all the faces rated in this training data were either Asian or white people. Do you see why you have to actually read the stuff you're citing? You can't just look at a headline and say, well, that's science, when you have your AI trained exclusively on Asian and white faces. Then be surprised when that same AI doesn't think women that aren't white or Asian have feminine faces. And with that in mind, if you told me attractive white women are more likely to be conservative, that would be a lot less of a surprising thing to say than just attractive people are more likely to be conservative. White women have to deal with misogyny, yes, but they benefit from white supremacy, and many are very invested in upholding a world where they're number 2 in the social hierarchy. It's easier than being number 3 or 4. All that aside, this study does cite a source for its claim that conservative people are more attractive. So I read that study too. Again, even in the abstract, it's made clear this isn't some magical property of right-wing people. The study's authors speculate that beautiful people earn more, which makes them less likely to support wealth redistribution. And importantly, these findings are limited. It finds that politicians on the right in Europe, the USA, and Australia look more beautiful, apparently. I wonder if there's a certain factor we mentioned earlier that might have something to do with this, given the countries listed. Did these guys just invent the white woman detector? Now, don't get me wrong, this doesn't mean that it's wrong to conclude that typically conservatives are more attractive people. There are a fair few studies that show just that. But we have to ask ourselves why that is. Attractiveness is still subjective, and even if we're taking a huge sample of people's opinions, we're just aggregating subjective opinions. Those opinions don't come out of nowhere, and they don't magically make an objective reality come out of them. Enough subjective opinions do not magically make an objective opinion. And those opinions don't come out of nowhere. They are shaped by the societies the participants of the studies grew up in, the beauty norms that have been fed to them, the prejudices they learn in tandem with these beauty standards. It's not wrong that, say, traditionally attractive politicians tend to be conservative, but it's a whole different thing to bring up this field of study with its strengths as well as its weaknesses, to try and make the case that conservatives are just, as a whole, attractive, or that succumbing to leftist ideas makes you ugly. Rather, our ideas of attraction are based on the model our society teaches us, one that is often very conservative. But even with that in mind, some of these studies have major problems. In my opinion, not enough of them interrogate the cross-sections between perceptions of race and perceptions of attractiveness. You can normalise for this, and you should in this kind of study, in my opinion. Some of these studies don't even mention this as a factor, despite this potentially having a massive impact. And this is partially because academia also has this selection bias. You're more likely to get on in academia if you're rich. You're more likely to get further in academia if you're white. So academics have the same biases. And the people who are more likely to spot these issues and point them out and attack them in peer review are not necessarily getting to the levels they need to make those points. A racist, white supremacist society isn't likely to find black and brown people equally attractive as white people. If you ask a Klan member whether he thinks Megan Thee Stallion is hot, he's not going to admit that he does. And he might even not. His disgust at the very idea of brown people existing would affect how this hypothetical racist sees the world. Probably, but it's Megan Thee Stallion, so he's probably lying to himself. These studies, as extensive as they might be, and some of them are extensive, are shaped by the people they survey. They're shaped by their attitudes, where they come from, what questions they're being asked. I have an issue with the conclusion, say, in the last paper I mentioned, concluding that politicians on the right look more beautiful in Europe, the USA, and Australia. Because it implies so much that is unsaid, that should have been picked up in peer review. What does beautiful mean? Beautiful to whom? Beautiful how? And though it does go into how it quantifies this data in depth, we found this group of people is more beautiful, is just unscientific language. And with that, we return, unfortunately, to our hunky Tory. I'm never going to be able to unsee this Boris Johnson picture, am I? Who's going to be my sleep paralysis demon? Anyway, the hunky Tory study controls the socioeconomic status, which is good, but lacks the data to account for biases due to race, which is quite a stumbling block when you're looking at attractiveness in politicians and concluding that Republicans are more attractive. Nevertheless, it comes to the same conclusions as the previous studies we talked about here. These studies, 201, are limited by their nature as studies on a subjective and societally determined paradigm. There are only so many ways you can try and tie a question like this down to make it objective. Although normalising your data for race would be one that would go a long way. That being said, it's not entirely a shock that in general, people that do well in a society, are treated nicely, have few problems, are more likely to be conservative. If you're invested in a system, and you haven't been confronted with the problems others are facing due to the same forces of supremacy that make your life so comfortable, you're not going to be likely to want to tear it down. The way these studies are being used by both the press and internet arseholes like Tim Pool, however, is just dishonest. Boris Johnson is not an attractive man, and I shouldn't have to say that like it's a controversial take. He's not, by any measure, and these studies don't suggest that him being a conservative makes him, in particular, more attractive. If anything, they say the opposite. People tend to find people with similar political views more attractive. Conservatives are not inherently attractive, but stereotypically attractive people are more likely to be conservative than those that might look less traditionally beautiful. At the same time, none of this is relevant at all to Kristen Stewart doing a sexy cover for the female gaze. None of this stuff means that objectively being more left-wing makes you less sexy, or that Kristen Stewart is uglier because she's socially liberal, or any other bollocks way Tim Pool and his ilk want to spin this. For these people, they're incapable of looking at science for what it is, for seeing its merits and its shortfalls, like you're supposed to as a scientist. They're incapable of seeing what a study says and what it doesn't say. Instead, they think, how can we use this? And the answer to that, Tim, is not the fuck like this. Bringing this up to justify anything you're saying is just a complete non sequitur. It has nothing to do with anything you've been talking about. But to be fair, that is par for the course for Pim Tool.
One fun thought, extra-dimensional beings that exist on one dimension higher than us, in the 5th dimension, or in a 5th dimension that they can't control, so they can experience time as a spatial dimension.
And even if it did, why would that matter? Even if these studies proved, objectively, that all conservatives are 10 out of 10 smoke shows, which they categorically do not, and the one study you referred to in your video, Tim, shows basically nothing the fuck at all, for the record, it wouldn't do anything to change my political beliefs. I'm not left-wing because left-wingers are hot. I'm left-wing because I want the world to be a better place. I want a world with as little suffering and oppression as possible. I want people to have a shot at happiness, to not be crushed under the foot of billionaires and their sycophants. Even if everyone standing by my side looked like rats with mange, I'd still be a leftist. And I'm concerned that you're implying your beliefs don't work that way. Are you really right-wing just because you think that there are going to be some hotties around at CPAC for you to make out with? Because no one is taking Ian Miles Chong or Ollie London. You can have them. Go ahead. You clearly think they're the hottest people you've ever seen. You're welcome to them. In the meantime, I'll be over here with all the commie cat girls, having the time of my life. Not a beanie in sight. Is that the end of the video? I thought there'd be more dramatic readings. No? No? Fuck it. Let's have one more laugh at these Twitter comments before we get to the last section. Take it away, Kristen Stewart haters, and to the rest of you, thanks for watching.
She just looks smelly. A bizarre freak undercover. Wow, she made herself very ugly.
Oh, for sure. This photo screams that this person is stable and knows who she is.
Weimar!
This is what extreme narcissism looks like.
I am hetero. She is not even remotely hetero. The TRAs are going to love this.
Where's the little boy undercover from?
Woke mob trying hard to be maxing man. Sick face. Sick face. For me look like hobo high on meth and try hard to masturbate yikes.
Lol, not edgy, or that gay, in fact. She can't ever really be gay. If she really wants to be gay, she should have sex with men.
She looks sick and depressed. I've heard... If a professional photo shoot can't make her look good, just imagine what she looks like in real life. Also, Rolling Stone. She has no idea who she is. At the moment, just a channel for the sick, sad, and depraved. This is really sad.
This image strikes me as someone who unequivocally does not know who she is, or what she wants.
Who hurt you?
Rolling Stone was purchased by CIA front some years ago. Exactly. Unfortunately, some predator lie Harvey Weinstein hurt her, and that is how she is dealing with it. Some will celebrate her actions. I just think it's sad. What happened to this beautiful young woman? Gotta be a joke.
I need to wash my brain of that image. Thanks, Cheryl. Side-eye. The propaganda. It was malicious and intentional. These trends and abnormal behaviours were inculcated via programming.
The Hollywood pedo machine got there. She is repulsive. Lesbians are never like they are in porn. So hideous. Folks, this is what you're voting for when you vote blue. Facepalm emoji. I don't know who this dude lady is. Don't care either. What I do know is that she looks disgusting AF. Vomit emoji. God has made everything good and beautiful. What we're seeing, rapidly growing, is the perversion of his creation. And instead of being broken-hearted over it, the world is celebrating all these perversions. We as a nation need to return to God. If not, this will be the downfall of our country. There will be no more hope. The woman shall not wear that which pertaineth unto a man, neither shall a man put on a woman's garment, for all that do so are abomination unto the Lord thy God. Dude 22:5. Did they learn nothing from Sports Illustrated? Hey, Jesus Christ. Thank you for watching this video all the way to the end. If you like this video, why not like it, leave a comment, subscribe, tell your friends about it. I am quite poor, so if you have a few coins burning a hole in your pocket and you hate to see a tran like me down on her luck, a tran that is objectively, scientifically ugly, why not send me some fucking money? You can give one-time donations on Coffee or PayPal, links below, as always, or
better yet, sign up to my Patreon, where you get early videos, access to the members-only Discord, my Nintendo Switch friend code, and exclusive content. In addition to all that good stuff, you'll also, if you sign up, get your name read out at the end of each video, just like these lovely people. Vince Whitaker, Amelia Unchained, Sarah Rudston, Jason Haig, Frank McManus, Susan Foster, Helena, Sierra Whiskey, Arestria, Ali Catkill, Brian, John N, Scully, Jan, Lloyd Luciente, Jason Cribbett, Shield Vaden, Robin Podolsky, Exploding Turtle, Casual Observer, Terry Roberts, Manta Ray, Courtney Burmack, Sleepy Slug, Philippa Tabrogger, Soma Piglet, Brain Douche, Artie Wolf, Hayden Gaylor, Greg Noble, Deanna McMillan, Karen Reglado, Alexander Lilly, Peter Lisbrell, Howard Lott, Narania, Scarjan, and Joey Cobalt. See you next time.
Why can't she be a pretty lesbian? Why'd they have to make them ugly? Make it make sense.
God pray to God for her soul. Please, Lord, let her see the light. Jesus, amen.
I think she still looks hot. Is she a lesbo? This'll go the way of hardcore wrestling. They will constantly have to up the ante to shock people. What's next?
20 non-binary elephant gangbang? 20 non-binary elephant gangbang?